What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. I can't believe it's been 5 years. That's just for some reason that number just seems it just seems unreal. It can't have been that long ago. Um, I think those of you who remember that day will recall that it was also a Sunday, like today, when it happened, and it seemed so. Um, when the news first broke, it first broke on TMZ. And for about 10 minutes, I was convinced that this was a hoax. I was convinced that it was a hoax because, wait a minute, Kobe was just in the news the day before. Matter of fact, when I went to bed, he was in the news because LeBron James had just passed him on the all time scoring list. And I think the game was in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly, the game was in Philadelphia. And Kobe Bryant had just congratulated him and shouted him out on Twitter. So when his news first broke that he had died in a helicopter crash, I said, "Nah, this is a hoax. We had all these hoax before, these celebrity death hoax. They do it all the time." Eddie Murphy, remember they said he died in a skiing accident years ago. I remember back when I was in high school, we didn't have social media then, but I remember there was this rumor that Scott Baio had died, he had overdosed. Like there was always these celebrity rumors, right? So I said, I don't believe this. But then when it started being reported on MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CNN, and you see this graphic that just seemed incomprehensible, 1978 to 2020, and you're like, wait a minute, this is Kobe being Bryant. Like this is the greatest player of his generation. In my opinion, the greatest player of the 21st century. I don't give a damn what other people say about LeBron. It's Kobe. He's the greatest player of the 21st century. LeBron ain't win 5 championships in a decade. I mean, in this millennium, excuse me, or this century. Um, this can't be real. And it's such a fluky way. And this is not to denigrate or lessen the impact of the passing of the other people on that flight. I'm not saying that. It's just that they're not well known. They're not worldwide known people. And for a man who was as careful as Kobe Bryant was for the most part, and how he conducted himself, and so rigid in his routine, he had taken his flight probably 1,000 times. This just seems so flukish for this to occur to him. And with his baby, his daughter Gianna, um, it was just a horrible day. It's one of the darkest days in sports history. One of the darkest days. Um, at one point in time, and I think anybody that's followed my channel for at least 10 years know about this. There was a time I was one of the biggest critics of Kobe Bryant. And it was more stemming from the Michael Jordan versus Kobe crap, right? Then over the years, I started becoming more and more of a defender of Kobe because I didn't like how ESPN was disrespecting him. I didn't like how, a lot of these now all of a sudden LeBron fan boy outlets were disrespecting Kobe to the point now where, they're questioning whether Kobe's a top 15 or 20 all time player, which is absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous, But man, Kobe Bryant was the first player, superstar player I could think of, that played as long as he did, whose total career I observed. You know what I'm saying? The guy played 20 years in the NBA. And I remember when he was being talked about in high school, when he was a huge basketball star in Philadelphia. And I remember seeing an article about him in Slam magazine back when he was 16, 17 years old. He was a high school phenom. And, you know, because at that point in time, he actually had the bald head. He grew the fro a little, I think maybe the year after, but or 2 more years. But he actually had a bald head then. And, you know, I kind of thought he looked a little bit like a, you know, well, I'm not going to say that, but you know, I thought that he'd be a good player, but I didn't think that he was going to be what he became. Absolutely not. I didn't think that he was the natural talent that a Michael Jordan or maybe some of these other guys were, even a Michael Finley. I wasn't sure he could even be as great as Michael Finley. But was I wrong about that? And I remember when the Lakers made that at the time very unpopular trade for Vlade Divac, exchange for Kobe Bryant. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell? Laker fans like, what the hell are you doing? But we should have never, I'm not a Laker fan, I'm just talking about basketball fans in general, we should have never questioned the judgment of Jerry West. He saw what Kobe Bryant was capable of. And boy, oh boy, did we see what he was capable of. I mean, and this is how I knew he was built different. I remember that game against the Utah Jazz, who had the Lakers number back then. I mean, just had their number, man. Pick and roll used to just kill Shaq and the Lakers. But I remember when Kobe shot those 3 air balls in the playoffs. And honestly, I would think that those type of moments, those debilitating moments where he was shooting air balls, that would mentally destroy a lesser player. But with Kobe, that just motivated him to go out there and perform and practice harder and to shut up his critics and to go out there and prove that he belonged not just on the NBA stage, not to prove that he belonged in the pantheon of greats, but to prove that he was the best. And you know what I'm saying? He was just totally a totally different animal than what I was accustomed to seeing as far as young talent at that time. Because many of those young players in the mid 90s, that was the beginning of the age when you started seeing these guys who were starting to become spoiled by the money, fame, and success. You know what I'm saying? Or these guys that weren't panning out to be what we thought they would be. And Kobe, here's a guy who had promise, but he wasn't as heralded as a LeBron James. You know what I'm saying? But he proved his worth. And he was playing on a team that was very loaded initially. But you couldn't deny what he was and what he was capable of. And this is a guy that worked on his game, worked on his craft. And by 2000, you clearly could see, even though the NBA and the post-Jordan era by then was not trying to promote him, they were trying to push Vince Carter. That's the guy they was trying to push. But when we watched the games, we could see that the real guys of that generation, the real dudes, I mean, that's not to knock Vince. He's a Hall of Famer. But the guy that they should have been pushing was Kobe Bryant and Allen Iverson. And Kobe just took his by force. Kobe just was not going to be held back any longer. He wasn't comfortable being a third string guy or just a co-star. You know what I'm saying? He wanted to be the man. And I remember that 2000, 2001 season, we saw that big leap in Kobe Bryant performance. You know what I'm saying? And, I mean, he's the closest thing I've ever seen to Michael Jordan. He's the closest thing I've ever seen to him. Unbelievable competitor. And I would argue, and this is coming from a Jordan fan, that he had more of varied a skill set than Michael Jordan. I think he was a little bit better ball handler. He had a little bit more range. He had more in his bag as far as offensive skills and moves. He was unbelievable. The only thing that separates, I think, Jordan, and I know who Hendo won't agree with this, but I think what separates those two is the championships. And Jordan was a more athletic. Jordan had a little bit better shot selection. Jordan had bigger hands, which made him a better finisher. And Jordan was just a little bit more disciplined in how he approached the game at times, especially from an offensive standpoint. I think Jordan was the better defender. I think that's what separates them. You know what I'm saying? But teach his own. But like I said before, this guy's the closest thing I've ever seen to Michael Jordan. And if Michael Jordan is the GOAT, and if he's the closest thing to a Michael Jordan, then how the hell could he not be in the conversation? Especially if he has more rings than LeBron or Ramon James. It makes no sense. And for those who always bring up his field goal percentage, keep in mind the era in which he played in. There were virtually nobody in that era that was shooting over 45, 46% for their career. Trace McGrady shot 43%. Iverson shot 42.5%. Chris Paul shot like 45, 44%. Kobe shot 45%. You know what I'm saying? Jerry Stackhouse shot 41% from the floor. There's a reason behind this. Because the spacing wasn't the same. The defense was much more intense. You had big men patrolling the paint, which made it more difficult to score. You weren't getting these uncontested forays to the rim. And it was more of an abundance of mid-range shots. All those things add up to a lesser and less efficiency. But it wasn't because these guys weren't skilled. It's the defenses were more intense. With Kobe Bryant, man, he did a lot of amazing things. If I'm not mistaken, I think he beat more 50-win teams in the playoffs than anybody in the history of the NBA. You could argue that he was playing in perhaps the most contested era and the most dominant era for the Western Conference in the history of the NBA. And he did something that I don't know if I think anybody else ever done before. After being part of one of the most dominant duos, if not the most dominant duo in NBA history, Shaq and Kobe, he essentially forced Shaq out, right? You can talk about how you feel about that, how you want to, but he forced Shaq out, forced him out, and knew the pressure was on him to prove that he could win without Shaq. And while Shaq did win a championship with Dwayne Wade, Kobe one-upped him by going back-to-back with Pau Gasol, a guy who was seen as way too soft initially, and a guy who was doing absolutely nothing in Memphis. So he replaced Shaq with Pau Gasol and did a repeat. And I think we'll all agree that going from Shaq to Pau Gasol is more of a downgrade than going from Kobe to Prime D Wade. And I don't think Kobe gets enough credit for that. You know what I'm saying? And if it wasn't for the Achilles rupture, I think Kobe would have played longer and he would have been even higher on the all-time scoring list. We didn't know much about Kobe as far as his personal life. He, like Michael Jordan, was pretty much just, a guy that was motivated by basketball. He didn't really have friends. Um, but it's the thing. Before his untimely demise, from what I've been able to read about him, these things were starting to change about him as he entered his 40s. He was starting to open up a little bit, be a little bit more friendly, starting to reach out to friends, or at least teammates, and becoming more friendly. He was starting to attend basketball games, you might recall that, with Gianna. And Gianna had basketball aspirations of her own. And I really, truly wish that he was here for a multitude of reasons. Just the main one for the fact that so that his wife wouldn't be a widow and their kids would have their father. And of course, we all wish that Gianna was still here too. But man, I really wish he was here also because he would be that one voice. He would be that one guy who nobody could ever question his sincerity or his authenticity if he spoke on matters dealing with the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, Kareem is still around, but Kareem has never been a guy who's been in the media like that, and he's older. Kobe, we care about what he thinks when it comes to the Lakers organization, and I know he would have some really choice things to say about what's going on in LA if he was around. I'm certain of that. Absolutely certain that he would have some choice things, man. But it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years. And I can't believe it's been 5 years. And I don't appreciate how the media, as I said earlier, have tried to downplay his legacy. I don't appreciate it. But he'll never be forgotten. And the legacy still lives on. And, his memory will go on. Anyway, tell me what you guys think.